Hello everybody, welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Alter sleeves, support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I am Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys.
Ruben Bressler.
Hey, good afternoon.
There you go. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 black cards on Arena. Ruben?
Well, I guess it was kind of cheating that Phyrexian Juggernaut made a comment, but it was also a very good comment. So even though this week is our top 10 Phyrexian cards, Phyrexian Juggernaut wins for the top black cards on Arena with a comment that says, I really like the new Planeswalker from Strixhaven. She's regal, sophisticated, and powerful, and she doesn't even have to get up from her chair. Professor Onyx is a Planeswalker with the static ability whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Her abilities are so powerful, leave her alone for 1 turn and she will run away with the game. Such a cool new character with an asterisk.
Yeah, very, very cool. As they mentioned, Professor Onyx was a mythic from Strixhaven, 2 black and 4 generic mana for a 5 loyalty. Legendary Planeswalker Liliana, because she's undercover.
Hence the asterisk.
That's right. Magecraft, again, cast an instant or... If you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This card is stupidly powerful. +1, you lose 1 life. You look at the top 3 cards of your library. You put one of them into your hand and the rest in your graveyard. -3, each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. And -8, each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. And you repeat this process 6 more times. Yeah.
Very cool card. I mean, when you have a 6-mana Planeswalker, you want it to kind of take over the game by itself, and this certainly does. Card advantage, creature removal, an ultimate that pretty much puts a final nail in the coffin for a game, and also a static ability on this one, which the 6-mana Liliana's, those static abilities, pretty darn good.
I think anybody would be fine to have Professor Onyx be their professor.
Nice. Yeah, this is not a card that I've beaten often. If they untap with this card, good chance I'll lose that game. Very, very good chance. Because even if you got them low, that Magecraft thing starts ticking up and you just die. So Congratulations to them, Phyrexian Juggernaut. Thanks for being a part of the show. Please contact us on social media for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. And maybe you go in next week's free gift certificate. So, someone in our wonderful Discord had pointed out that there were over 220 Phyrexians thanks to the giant creature update where we finally have the Phyrexian creature type. And it's just kind of funny to me, having seen multiple times over the years, basically every time Phyrexians came up in any form or fashion in Magic, they're like, we thought about the Phyrexian creature type, decided not to do it. And they're like, every single time. And then they're like, okay, finally, we bid in. It's like, well, maybe if you make an entire release called the Brothers War, you need Phyrexian as a creature type, which I will take. So, and then Ruben comes in with just like the left hook. Like, I got my list and I did the thing. Blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, what if it's not the type Phyrexian, but there's still Phyrexian stuff? And I'm like, damn it, Ruben.
Yeah.
So then a whole another 40 or 50 or whatever cards that I have to consider. And one of those did make my list.
And it's not even counting Phyrexian adjacent cards, like Glistening Oil, for example. Those definitely could be on somebody's list.
Fair enough. So, that said, let's talk about our top 10 Phyrexian cards. Ruben, what's your number 10?
This was Axel Gear from our Discord, who's been a long-time Discord member. Thank you so much for the idea, Axel Gear.
Nice.
And my number 10 is one of those Phyrexian cards that doesn't have a Phyrexian type, but it is an extremely Phyrexian feeling card. Because if you're a Phyrexian, you are striving for completion with the Pleat, and you're striving for perfection, and the perfection that you're striving for, in no other card does it become as creepy and otherworldly, and does the message get sent home as much as on Phyrexian Unlife. Phyrexian Unlife is 2 generic and a white mana enchantment that says you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. And as long as you have 0 or less life, all damage is dealt to you as though its source had infect. This was, of course, from New Phyrexia. That art is haunting, and it is everything that screams Phyrexian to me.
Yeah, this is
an interesting card. Like it, you want poison counters, like, so you could side this in against big green decks that aren't designed to hit you multiple times, kind of. Definitely an interesting card.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's one of those, like, it's like $5+, I think, just because it hasn't been reprinted at all. But it's also just one of those really weird effects that, like, it just takes one weird interaction for this card to be worth like $1 million, because this is the one card that says you don't lose life for having 0 or less life. A lot of times, like, you can't lose the game or whatever, but this one, just that weird specific wording. And it also feels very Phyrexian because it's absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
And it freaks me out.
I've definitely played this card in the Ad Nauseam Angel's Grace deck as another version of Angel's Grace. It's very good against burn decks. Yeah, I mean, and it's also huge combo potential. But for me, really, that art and that name and the flavor of the ability was what got me.
Yeah, old Jason Chan, Mr. Jace the Mind Sculptor himself, bringing it home. Nerd Girl, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is one of 2 hires.
I've got 2 hires, but they'll be showing up later. But my number 10 is it's the classic. This is the one of the classic Phyrexian creatures. This was the card that should have tipped the scale, and them saying, you know what, this really should be a Phyrexian Elf warrior, because the whole idea of infect does not work if the Glistener Elf doesn't work. If this card isn't balanced, if it doesn't make sense, if it's too fast or strong or slow or whatever, this card has to be everything. Like, it's perfect. The numbers are perfect. Glistener Elf is 1 green mana for a common 1/1 now Phyrexian Elf warrior with infect. It deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters and to players in the form of poison counters. And again, if you get 10 of them, you die. So yeah, this was a 1 mana 2/2, quote unquote, but it features infect, which works really weird, which is awesome, and then features the counters, which you can do proliferate stuff with, which is also great. And like, it was a modern staple, or obviously in the infect decks. Like, this card is awesome, and I love it. And infect doesn't work if this doesn't work. Just period.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, this is one of the ones for this top 10. I had more cards on my top 10 that I thought were relevant and I wanted to include and couldn't. Normally, I'm like, I need one more. Like, this card's okay, and like I got like a 10th. But in this situation, I had like 17, and I was like, I can't cut any of these. Like, what is happening? Can we do a top 20? Like, right. I think I needed it. Glistener Elf was on the list, but unfortunately was on the chopping block. I love infect. I think it's such a cool mechanic. I know people hate it, but I like turning my creatures sideways, and I like insane, silly stuff. So I'm a big fan.
I like it.
And I like pump spells too. And infect was really the first time when pump spells became like giant growth was a playable Magic card in standard. It was great. When Mirrodin Besiege came out and infect became a keyword for the very first time, we didn't get a 1-drop. We had Vector Asp, but you had to pay it for it. And people were like, we just need a 1 mana 1/1 infect creature and we'll be golden. They won't give it to green because that's the pump spell color. So they'll put it somewhere weird. Then they put it in green. It was like, oh my God, we did it. And it has changed Magic, and it is a perfect creature, really.
Yeah. And this does all the things it needed to do, except it doesn't have the word Phyrexian on it. And it should. Oh well. All right.
It does now.
It does now.
It does now. That's good. Number 9. Nerd Girl, what's number 9?
So my number 9 is kind of, I think, to be a fan favorite. It's a card that I enjoyed playing, and I'm super glad that this particular creature type has a Phyrexian creature in it, and that's the Chancellor of Annex. It is a 5/6 flying angel for a lot of mana, for 7, 4 colorless and 3 white. And it says you may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, each opponent casts their first spell, counter that spell unless they pay 1 colorless mana. It has flying, and then when it's on the battlefield, whenever an opponent casts this spell, counter it unless they pay 1. So it has this like mana tax right out of the gate even, which if it's in your opening hand is really good against aggressive decks, all sorts of things. This card is a staple in red-black Reanimator, and all around I think it's just a really cool art and everything I want a Phyrexian to be.
Yeah, the fact that this card was honestly used in any form or fashion, this is one of those cards that like I just think it doesn't read very well, but it just must play unbelievably well, and that's kind of where we're at.
I mean, the effect of that all of the Chancellors have, which, by the way, all of the Chancellors have been errated to add the Phyrexian type, which is a good call. So now we have a Phyrexian Vampire, a Phyrexian Beast, a Phyrexian Giant, a Phyrexian Sphinx, and, of course, this Phyrexian Angel. They are kind of clunky, right? They read real clunky. But anything that has an effect for free and anything that has an effect before the game begins is always going to be good. And this one in particular, because it interacts with your opponent's board, is and their opponent's hand, is a huge deal.
Definitely.
Yep, absolutely. So let's move on here. Oh, that was your number 9, not your number 10. Ruben, what's number 9?
My number 9 is one of my 2 hires on somebody else's list.
Everybody got hires. 2 exactly. I'll take it. All right, so for my number 9 here, this was a absolutely awesome creature. This is one of those creatures that, you know, it kind of came around not right when they were making like creatures good or whatever. That kind of happened with Baneslayer and just went from there. But it also, I think, came at a point where I was like, man, if we don't like slow down, I feel like the power creep of creatures is just going to go completely haywire. And I felt like they kind of restrained it and locked it in right around the rate of Blade Splicer. Blade Splicer is a white and 2 generic mana for a 1/1 rare human artificer. And it says when it enters the battlefield, you create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token, and golem creatures you control have first strike. So for 3 mana, you have 4 power, 4 toughness over 2 bodies. All of it's relevant. Blinking's relevant. That's really cool, but it's not busted. It's strong, but it's not sort of overpowered. It puts 2 bodies on the field for 1 card, and ultimately has just like, for me, like ridden that line. If it's like it's really powerful, but it's not. It doesn't feel overpowered in any way.
Yeah, this is a card I came across, and it didn't make like my short list of cards, but because I remember playing this in Limited and loving it. I don't think I could ever get enough of this card in Limited, but I don't know if it ever found a home much in Constructed. But I mean, I would be interested. Ruben tends to know all of those things.
It's true.
A bit of a home. I mean, at the time, the birthing pod decks were using any creature that was good for its stats and also could have an effect after it got potted away. And so Blade Splicer found a home in the Naya pod decks in Standard because it was a really good jumping point from 3 to 4, because you would still get your 3/3, and the 3/3 would have first strike, and you know, you could do things with that.
Nice.
It was never the best thing you could be doing. It was never, you know, the end all be all, we have to ban Blade Splicer, but it was solid. It was a solid role player.
There you go. All right, let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
I share my number 8
with me.
With you.
How about that?
So I'll describe it a little bit, and I'll let you describe it a little bit as well. I don't want to take over the whole description before we get to it, and we also talked about this card a little bit last week. This is the first of its kind, and it began a trend of this style of effect. And I don't think that we get Dark Confidant if we don't have this card. I don't think we get a bunch of, we certainly don't get Underworld Connections or Dark Tutelage without this card. And so it's a huge jumping off point for black card advantage.
Yeah, so this card made my list because it is kind of a staple. Like, I remember playing this as on my kitchen table as a little kid. I think this card is a ton of fun and really did kind of start to define what black was doing as far as card draw and card advantage, and that is Phyrexian Arena.
Nice.
Yeah, Phyrexian Arena is pretty simple. It's a generic black originally from Apocalypse. It's an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life.
Yes.
And this, of course, takes place in the Phyrexian Arena, in which Gerard had to combat against Urza during the Weatherlight storyline.
And it's $15 no matter how you slice it. you're not finding a copy for less than that. You're just not. And this really, like, Necropotence was them going, like, way too far in that direction. But Phyrexian Re was just right in terms of it's good, it's powerful, it feels powerful. It doesn't, like, steamroll them, but it helps a lot. And this thing has killed me multiple times in cubes because you have to draw.
Yeah,
no choice.
it's still good in cubes, and it's still played a ton in EDH. I feel like it's kind of fallen off a little bit as far as more of the like eternal formats, but it's been reprinted so many times, and still $15 is a big telling point. I think it's tell.
Well, yeah, I mean, like this is go ahead.
If this card were in standard, it would see a lot of play. That's my opinion.
That's
I
true.
think that this would be a 4 of, and Phyrexian Arena decks would be some of the best decks in standard, even though it's a 3-mana enchantment that doesn't do anything the turn you play it.
You're right, and I think part of it is, and if you notice this, there's so much lifelink. There's so much life gain in the game. It's very subtle, and I gotta commend Wizards for it, but it definitely feels like Wizards is sort of grading on this curve of creatures that they can keep making them a little bit better as long as they keep giving you life. And so if you gain life here and there, if this has lifelink or this provides 2 life or 3 life over time, that stuff adds up and allows you to make better, more scary spells and creatures, but not break the game essentially. So Phyrexian Arena wasn't sort of born into a world where a ton of really awesome cards have lifelink and a ton of really awesome spells gain you life. And I think it would be, I don't know, warping per se, but it would definitely be telling to like how much life gain there is in the format based on how strong that card would be. But if we're talking about cubes, this one was in mine, and I loved it, and it's great. And this is one of those I was scrolling through, and I was like, oh my god, they made it a Phyrexian. They really made it a Phyrexian, because it was super cool back in the day when it was just a minion. But let me tell you, no cube was complete, at least back in the day, without a Bone Shredder. Bone Shredder was a black and 2 generic mana for a 1/1 uncommon Phyrexian minion with flying. It has Echo of a black and 2 generic mana, aka its own cost. At the beginning of your upkeep, if it came under your control since the beginning of your last upkeep, you sacrifice it unless you pay its Echo cost. And when it enters the battlefield, you destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. That's a terror for those who don't know. And terror on a stick back in the day was awesome. Still pretty cool.
I mean, it's still pretty good.
But it was definitely awesome back in the day.
Definitely awesome back in the day. This is another card. I think this card would see a ton of play in standard. Like, they just don't make them like they used to in some ways. Like, there are a lot of bad creatures, but this one, top 8'd a Pro Tour, I think. Or, I mean, it was in the Rexer deck, the Recurring Nightmare Survival of the Fittest deck at some point. Because again, just like pod creatures, you want to have creatures that have value when they come into play and value even as they're leaving. And Bone Shredder fits the bill perfectly. Also, Urza's Legacy represent my favorite set of all time.
Nice. The cool thing about doing Phyrexian cards or, Phyrexian creatures is not only are they sweet, top 8ing Pro Tours, they're always good. For some reason, it seems like Wizards is putting a lot of effort into making these cards good. And like their power level on average for Phyrexian is just super high, but they're also just sweet cards that you're going to love to play in your cubes, your EDH decks, and just your friendly Magic games. I think this is one of our best top 10s for sure.
Nice. Let's move in here to number 7. Mine is higher on somebody else's list, and that's okay because it's awesome. But Ruben, what's number 7?
Number 7 is another Urza's Block card. I think I have one card from Saga, one from Legacy, and one from Destiny. On my list, because I just love what they did with the Phyrexians as a bad guy in that set. And they also made very good cards. And this is a card that won Worlds, I think twice, and I think also won a Pro Tour. One of the most famous Worlds finals of all time featured a mirror in which both players put this card into play and paid 19 life. Because that's what you do with Phyrexian Processor. Phyrexian Processor is a 4 generic mana artifact originally from Urza's Saga. It's also in From the Vault lore, so you know it's good. It's important. As it enters the battlefield, pay any amount of life. That's the Phyrexian flavor I want out of my life. 4 generic tap : create an XX black Phyrexian minion creature token, where X is the life that was paid as Phyrexian Processor entered the battlefield.
Back when I was making the Magic Show, and particularly when I was making the Magic Show at Pro Tours, What it was probably my favorite question that I ever came up with. It was a question, like, not only did I come up with it, like, they were multiple pros had came to me over the course of the event and said, this is like, we talked about this for like 30 minutes last night at dinner. And I got to ask Aaron Forsyth, and everybody knew. I was like, okay, there's a spell. And this is a design idea. It's not a real card, blah, blah. You say there's a spell that says 1 blue mana. It's an instant. It says draw 3 cards, lose some amount of life. What is the correct amount of life to lose? And I think Zvi Mauschwitz said 19. And I think Aaron Forsyth said somewhere in the 8 to 10 range, but he wasn't sure, yada, yada. But there were lots of pros who were like, what is the actual right number for 1 blue, draw 3 cards, downside? Phyrexian processor, you pay 19. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it'd have to be a whole lot because there'd just be turn 1 combo decks and limited legacy and stuff.
And also things like Angel's Grace or whatever, or Phyrexian Unlife. But the thing about the processor is that it was so common, it was so ubiquitous amongst those like Tinker Wildfire decks of the time, because you just get it out so early, and then your Grim Monoliths and Voltaic Keys would power out these giant tokens, and then in the mirror you would just be staring at each other because you each had 14 1919s if you couldn't do something about it.
Wow. Yeah, that was a hell of a card, and if you can go back and watch some of those matches, they're really, really sweet. Nerd Girl, what's number 7?
So my number 7 is a card that we've recently seen reprinted, but I think is a pretty iconic and fun card that everybody loves. It's going to be something you're going to see in a lot of cubes, and now that it's on Arena, I think people are enjoying it. So that is the Massacre Worm. This is a 6 mana, 3 colorless black for a 6/5 Phyrexian Worm. When Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. This is insane and limited. It's a pretty common reanimator target, and it's just something that we kind of see all over the place. I don't think it's necessarily overly powerful, and I think that that's why it's kind of flown under the radar, but we see it a lot, and it's definitely very iconic, I think, for a Phyrexian. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. I'd forgotten that this had first appeared in Mirrored and Besieged, and so when they did the big creature type update and turned Massacre Worm into a Phyrexian, I was like, really? That's a weird choice. Oh, right, it's from Mirrored and Besieged. That makes sense. But yeah, this card's insane. One of my favorite things to put into play with a Gyruda, back when I was playing the Gyruda deck. Yeah, I love this card. It's great. Yeah,
this is because it was reprinted in Core Set 2021. Like, it didn't even register as, oh, that's, from the Phyrexian War or whatever. You're like, oh, it's just a really good card. And, like, there's, there's Hug from Jesus and Resolving This versus Elves. Like, it's right, it's right there. Because, like, they cannot concede fast enough until they have to watch the animations and they die, and it's wonderful.
I also got to blink Athasa, or this with Athasa a bunch.
Oh, Lord.
In like Brawl and stuff. Yeah, this card's very, very good.
It's very fun. All right, let's move to number 6. Ruben, what you got?
I mean, my number 6 is one of the most iconic things of all time. Like, one of the most iconic images, one of the most iconic I think it's probably one of the most iconic teases of all time, because now we're used to Mark Rosewater giving us teases about sets of like, this set has this sentence in it. This set has this combination of creature types on it. And very early on, there was a tease that said that there was going to be a 1 mana 12/12. And we got one. And it's Phyrexian Dreadnought. Phyrexian Dreadnought is a generic mana for a 12/12 artifact creature, Phyrexian Dreadnought. Its creature type is its name. With trample. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice any number of creatures with total power 12 or greater. So getting it into play in the traditional way, not great. But under an illusionary mask or with a stifle, we can start doing some things.
Yeah, so this was my number 10. It kind of defined an entire deck type on its own. There was a deck called Stifle Knot, which was really cool. And the reason I put this on my top 10 is because there's a very good story that I liked from Mark Rosewater. And they did this series of, in order, they did an 8/8, which was Force of Nature and Alpha, Beta, Unlimited. They did Colossus that was the 9/9 in Antiquities. They did the Leviathan, the Dark as a 10/10, and then they did the Kraken in Ice Age as an 11/11. And so the story I heard Mark talk about was that he wanted to do a 12/12, and someone told him, "We're not going to do it unless you can think of something really cool." And then he came up with this. So we ended up getting the Ferexian Dreadnought as a 12/12, and I think it's such a cool deck, and it's such a cool card.
That's a great story. That's a classic Rosewater right there.
Yep.
I mean, this card was, now it's on the reserve list and it's $116 a copy. And this card was crap back in the day. Everyone hated this card. It was bad. You couldn't abuse it. You couldn't figure out a way to abuse it. The Illusionary Mask didn't even come up because Illusionary Mask worked weird for a long ass time anyway. But like Ferexian Dreadnought as a deck now that, Stifle didn't exist for many years. Like Stifle didn't exist when this card was when this was printed. So everyone was like, like what? I guess, but like if I sack all my dudes and they have a shatter, well, I look like an idiot. Well, as long as you're not sacrificing 12 powers worth of dude, then looks great.
Nothing worked with Dreadnought when it was printed because Illusionary Mask was a mess and nothing else that worked with it was printed. I mean, people, I believe at the very beginning, tried to make Humility work, where you would play Humility, play Dreadnought, and then get rid of the Humility somehow.
Right.
Which was horrifically inefficient. Then we finally got Stifle, and it was just 2 1-mana cards, so that was easy.
I mean, trying to get Humility to work with this sounds very late 90s Magic to me. Yeah. Yes.
There were definitely worse and more convoluted combos than Humility Dreadnought.
Yes. Nerd Girl, what's your number 6?
So my number 6 is what I think is a very iconic card that you're going to see a ton. You're going to see it in a lot of sideboards. It's seeing a lot of play in Modern. I mean, it's been a little while since I've been in it, but I've definitely basically played in a time where this card was just all over the place in the format, and that is Spellsky. This is a 2-mana 0/4 horror Phyrexian. This is an artifact creature as well, so it's going to be seeing a ton of play in Affinity and in every other sideboard. And what it does is for a blue Phyrexian mana, so blue or pay 2 life, you can change the target of a target spell or ability to Spellsky. So it basically just soaks up a removal spell or does something like that, which makes it super key for Affinity when your stuff is doing insane things. But it's also really good for any sideboard card when your opponent is doing silly things to your creatures. And it's colorless, so it can be played in any deck, and its ability is Phyrexian mana, so you don't even need to be in blue. It's great.
Yeah, this card's wonderful. Like, this is, I want to say R&D at the time was very excited about this card because of sort of its implications and how it's very broad, and would it be too much or too little? I think it hits perfectly in terms of what it costs in life to keep it around, and how your opponent kind of has to like struggle through it from time to time. And Spellsky's annoying. Like, that card's really painful.
I think that this card has been number 1 on multiples of my lists for top 10s, which we've had 187 of them now, so I'm going to have some repeats. But this card is maybe the most iconic sideboard card in the history of Modern. It's good against Burn. It's good against Infect. It's good against Boggles. It's good against removal spells. It's good against Affinity Mirrors because the Arcbound ability targets. It's good. I mean, it's good against Splinter Twin because you just take their Splinter Twin. Yeah. It's amazing, this card.
Yeah, this card has previously been seen on our top 10 2 CMC creatures, top 10 artifact creatures, top 10 0 power creatures, top 10 Svetlin Velenov, top 10 horrors, and yeah, that's just a lot of lists, and even now top 10 Phyrexian cards because this card is sweet. Well, when you look up the creature type Phyrexian and you sort it by EDH rec, what's the number 1 card that pops up? Bam! Right to the top. This card's $5 plus. It was a lot more expensive until they finally reprinted it in Double Masters, which was appreciated because who doesn't love a Ferexian Metamorph? Ferexian Metamorph is 3 generic mana and a Phyrexian blue mana, so again, blue or 2 life. It is a 0/0 rare artifact creature shapeshifter, and you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So, hot damn, this thing copies everything, and it's amazing.
Yeah, this was one of the Phyrexians that was on my short list that ended up getting cut because I remember this seeing a ton of play in Standard and I liked it, but I couldn't exactly remember the decks and I didn't know if it had found a home in any other format. So I love to hear that it's being played a ton in EDH. It's a super cool card, very iconic at the time that it was printed, and overall just really, really neat thing to have as a Phyrexian.
Yeah. I cannot overstate how good it is to be able to pod into another pod, right? Like you sacrifice your Blade Splicer and you search your library for a Metamorph and you just get another birthing pod. Like that's insane. Much less being able to copy a Worm Coil engine or whatever else happens to be on the battlefield.
Yeah, it is very, very sweet. And it copies anything. It doesn't say
any creature or artifact
on the battlefield. Anything crazy they have, they got a soul ring and you need one. Like whatever you paid 3 mana and 2 life for your soul ring. That's okay too. All right, let's move here to number 5. Ruben, what you got?
My number 5 is my final hire that's on somebody else's list.
Okay, fair enough. Nerd Girl, what's number 5?
Also my second and final hire.
Oof, I get to do all the number 5 heavy lifting?
Hey,
all right.
it's all you,
heavy
buddy.
lifting.
That is okay. This is one of those things, you know, this is a card that when I was looking at it, you know, thinking about it, I was like, if there is a game show for Magic and you have people on it who, you know, they definitely know Magic and all the Magic trivia and all that stuff, and you were to say, how do you spell this card, and give them 3 different ways to spell it, could they pick the right one on how to spell Skithiryx, Blight Dragon? Where does the Y go? Is it the first one? Is it the second one? Do you know? Would you answer for $50,000? You know what I mean? That type of thing.
Yeah, I was like, oh, Evan's going to ask me something and I'm going to know it. And then you said Skithiryx, and I was like,
nope, I got it wrong when I was typing it out too.
Yeah.
Skithiryx the Blight Dragon is a $15 mythic. It showed up last in Double Masters. It is a 2 black, 3 generic mana, 4/4 legendary dragon skeleton. That is awesome. Has flying and infect, and for 1 black mana, it gains haste until end of turn, and for 2 black mana, you regenerate it, which they don't do anymore, which is why it's so hard to reprint this damn thing, and part of why it's very expensive, because it's sweet.
Yeah.
It's the infect
I could see them not wanting to reprint it into like a current format, so I'm hoping that we'll see more reprints of this in like, you know, the EDH type decks and things like that, so it's not like going back into Standard.
Right.
I mean, I don't mind if it does, but I could see them not wanting to do that. But this is definitely a sweet card. I played with it a ton when it was first printed. It was great and limited. Also, like, the art is really sweet. It's something I really liked when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Fan favorite.
Yeah, the Bone Dragon art is very iconic. And also, I know that commanders that can realistically kill players in 2 or 3 swings are highly sought after, and Skithiryx is one of those commanders, alongside things like Karthus, Tyrant of Jund. You know, if you swing at one person with a Skithiryx, they're going to die.
Yeah, they're dead. And Scars of Mirrodin, you know, was just that last, it was right at the cusp, the end of where they were okay with Regenerate, and sort of having that be part of the game. And Regenerate's hard to explain, and it's just kind of a weird ability, and, you know, they don't even have room to explain it on this card and stuff like that. Either way, let's move on here to number 4, which is my last hire, but that's okay because it's sick. Ruben, what's number 4?
Number 4 is another creature that is just kind of ubiquitous. It's all over the place. Another sideboard staple, another standard staple, and it's reasonably priced for how much play it's seen over its history. It's Phyrexian Revoker. Mm-hmm. 2 generic mana gets you a 2/1 Phyrexian horror creature that says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a non-land card name. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated. It's a Pithing Needle, kind of, on a stick. Being a 2-mana 2/1, it's a Goblin Piker, right? So you need it to be able to do something, but we've seen 2-mana 2/1s, hello Snapcaster Mage, hello Dark Confidant, be able to see a ton of play in Standard if they have a relevant ability. And this certainly does. You're able to shut down the mana abilities of things like, Moxen and Elvish Archdruid, right? You're able to shut down that kind of stuff, in addition to the normal things that you want to shut down the activated abilities on, things like artifacts, planeswalkers, etc.
This was my number 5, my last hire. This is a staple for in the Vintage Workshops, Affinity decks. This is a card that isn't going anywhere. It's very powerful. It doesn't necessarily see a ton of play in a lot of different decks, but the decks that it, those decks are very good. The decks that it's in are great.
We don't have a lot of, how would you put it? Sort of like gunslinger showdown moments in Magic. Not too many, time to time. But when your opponent plays a fetch land, and you say Phyrexian Revoker, and it's on the stack, and you're just doing the thing. It's just you and them. It's just you and the world. You gonna let me resolve it? Can I resolve it? Because sure, you're probably going to name one of their other pieces, the other combo things they're doing, or whatever crap. But you could name that fetch land and just wreck their world. And they always have the second one in hand when they do that. They're like, yeah, whatever, name whatever you want. And you go, Scalding Tarn. And they go, oh my God! I've seen it happen. It's wonderful. That card is terrific. Nerd Girl, what's number 4?
So my number 4 is the reason Glistener Elf did not make the cut for my top 10.
Oh, no.
I decided that, I just kind of wanted to spread out the love for the archetypes a bit. And I think there is nothing more relevant to Infect than Blighted Agent.
Yep.
This is a 1/1 for 2 mana, colorless and a blue, for a human rogue Phyrexian now, I suppose, with Infect. So whenever it deals damage to a creature, they get a -1/-1 counter, or they get an Infect, the player gets an Infect counter. And it is unblockable, which is perfect and the exact thing I want my Infect to be doing.
It's a $15 foil. The card's silly and
For a common.
For a common, and it's just, there's a $15 uncommon in that set. That still hasn't been reprinted. But Blighted Agent, regardless, is just a hell of a Magic card, because what's better than having a small creature with Infect? You can't even block the damn thing.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, this card is what got Blazing Shoal banned out of Modern, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that in addition to wanting a 1-mana 1/1, a 2-mana 1/1 that was evasive. I think people just wanted a flyer, or people just wanted, something that was tough to block. The fact that we got can't be blocked in New Phyrexia is absolutely buck wild.
It's in Modern and Legacy that we're seeing, this deck do well. It's nuts.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise when it showed up in New Phyrexia, but let's move on here to our number 3. Ruben, what's your number 3?
Number 3 is one of the most iconic arts of all time, and it's by an artist we don't see a ton. John Zalesnik, who has done the art for Counterbalance. He did the art for Trickbind. He actually did the art for the snow-covered mountain that was in Cold Snap, and a couple of other things here and there. But his first art that he ever did for Magic is still his most indelible piece. And I remember getting a copy of Duelist magazine when it was on the cover. When on the cover I saw this sort of alien, like from the movie Aliens, alien thing, and then I picked up a copy of the card and I saw for the first time a Phyrexian negator, and I was like, wow, this is Magic, right?
Yeah.
This is cool. Phyrexian negator is 2 generic into black for a 5/5 with trample.
Woo!
Phyrexian horror. Whenever Phyrexian horror is dealt damage, sacrifice that many permanents. Well, that's not great. But
Oops.
at the time, people aren't playing burn spells. People are playing counter spells. So who cares if it has a drawback that depends on damage?
People were playing Dark Ritual, for God's sake.
Yeah.
This was turn 1 negator go. If they had the bolt, yeah, sure. But if they had island go, you're going to beat them to death. And that's kind of how it worked for a long time.
Especially with kitchen table Magic, when we're seeing cards like this, but I remember someone, like you said, island go, or it could be forest squirrel go.
Right.
Okay, attack you for whatever. And you're like, well, do I try? Do I care? Yeah, this card is really sweet. This is on the reserved list and was famously put as one of the face cards of the dual decks Phyrexia versus the Coalition. Because see, at the time, there wasn't the out on the reserve list that they couldn't make foils. They could still make foils. They couldn't make normal non-foil versions. Well, this basically sewed that up because it damaged the value of the original negator so badly that there were ripples, something, legal probably said something, and no foils ever. And suddenly, you know, some from the vaults are now very expensive because they have reserve list cards in them. There you go. Nerd Girl, what's your number 3?
So my number 3 is a card that we've seen reprinted a few times. It's had a promo card, and it gets people very excited. You know, even though it's been reprinted a bunch, it's still worth a fair amount of money, which I find to be very interesting. But for the most part, I think it's only really found a home in one deck, which makes it kind of this weird thing that kind of surprises me, and that is Wurmcoil Engine. This is a 6-mana, 6/6 Worm Phyrexian with Death Touch and Lifelink. And when Wurmcoil Engine is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you get a 3/3 colorless artifact worm creature token with Death Touch, and you get another one that has Lifelink. So it's splitting into multiple bodies. I mean, it is kind of expensive, but it still seems great regardless. I'm surprised we're not seeing it more in other decks, but it definitely makes sense for Tron because it's colorless. And I think this is an awesome card.
This card is sick. Like, this card is dope. This was the Scars of Mirrodin pre-release promo. They gave one to everyone. They now $27+ card to every person who showed up to that event, which was fantastic. Wurmcoil Engine, like, this is the card that scared me to death. That, like, oh my god, where are creatures going in Magic? Because 10 years ago, this thing showed up and it was like, we'd never seen stats like this ever. A 6/6 that makes it into 2/3/3s that splits its abilities. Oh my god, where are we going in Magic? This was, again, another giant plateau of where creatures are going to be and as good as they're ever going to get. But that also means this is dope as hell. The art is fantastic. The Double Masters versions are great. Like, this card is just sweet all the way around, and I love it.
Yeah. And the flavor for it, I mean, splitting into the 2 worms is so cool also.
It was my number 4.
Had its time. It had its time in the sun in standard. It, of course, is one of the things that Tron is trying to do. You know, if you can't play a Karn Liberated, oh, well, I got a Wurmcoil Engine. Deal with that.
And it goes in any EDH deck, any commander deck whatsoever. Just
absolutely
throw it on in.
Card's spectacular. Yeah,
card is absolutely sweet again. My number 4, for a reason, because awesome, sweet artifact creatures that are now Phyrexian are fantastic. Because we now have, oh god, this is a $40 card. We now have a Phyrexian Golem, because this card is sick. What we have is what we describe as one-shot the robot. This is where he comes up and he whacks you in the face and you just die. Because Blightsteel Colossus exists. It's a card. Darksteel Colossus, bigger, badder, uncut. And Blightsteel Colossus is 12 freaking mana. And there ain't no discounts on that. 12 mana for an 11/11 mythic artifact Phyrexian Golem these days, artifact creature Phyrexian Golem, with trample, infect, and indestructible, and it will be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it, and shuffle into its owner's library instead. And this thing's just a monster, and people love it, and it's great in Vintage, and it's great in all these silly commander decks, and in the middle of it's an awesome mythic.
Yep. This was my number 5. Nice. It's kind of hard to overstate that this is the only creature that they're ever going to print that can kill you in one swing. Even Emrakul the Eon's Torn doesn't do this.
It's true.
This is the Tinker target, right? This is arguably the biggest, baddest creature that will ever be printed, even badder and better than things that are bigger than it stat-wise, because of the infect, because of the indestructible, because of the ability to just put a game to its end immediately.
Yeah, the art actually I really love that the art does exactly what everything you're saying does. This looks like a badass, and that's exactly what it is. You're going to see this a ton in any sort of deck that wants to bring stuff out, cheat it out, whatever. And like you said, Tinker is a pretty premium target as well. So.
Yeah, this
is much the same. And also the art harkens back to the Darksteel Colossus, which was the 2-shot robot, which was everything was the same except for the Darksteel Colossus didn't have infect and cost 1 less mana. So Blightsteel Colossus is not only the spiritual successor, but the actual successor.
What you could argue in that aspect is you would say, what if we doubled the Darksteel Colossus's power for 1 additional mana? And that's kind of what they did. All right, let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
Number 2 is another sort of history of Magic kind of card, because it's not good anymore. You know, I think you can pick up a copy for less than 50 cents. But there was a time, ladies and gentlemen, wavy effect on the camera as we harken back to 2000. And we look once again at Urza's Legacy Standard. And we find that for the first time, mid-range is an archetype that is playable. And we're playing generic black and green cards and creatures that sort of like mess with the board in interesting ways. And we get a deck called The Rock and His Millions, named so for the popular wrestler at the time, and still now, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and of course the millions of fans that Dwayne had. The millions, of course, being Deranged Hermit, and The Rock himself being Phyrexian Plague Lord. Phyrexian Plague Lord was printed as a creature carrier, now a Phyrexian carrier, because there was a cycle. There was I think 2 commons, an uncommon, and a rare that scaled up the first ability, which is tap and sacrifice Phyrexian Plague Lord. Target creature gets -4/-4 until the end of the turn. But it's that second ability. Sacrifice a creature, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, that really put the Rock on the map. 5 mana, 4/4. Them's Dirkwood Boar stats. This thing was a terror in any board that it came down on. It's really good with tokens. It's really good just by itself.
This was my number 7. This card is absolutely terrific. Now, for those who want to know, Phyrexian Denouncer was the common that you could tap, sack, -1/-1. Phyrexian Debaser was the 4 mana 2/2 flyer that you could tap -2/-2 when you sack it. And for 4 mana, the uncommon 3/3 Phyrexian Defiler dealt -3/-3. Now this is on my number 7 for a reason. Like we promised you at one point in time, this card was amazing. This card was way better than most of what was going on at the time. Certainly at the standard at the back of the time, this was in my cube. Like when I stopped playing my cube, this was still in it. Absolutely, this card was still fantastic. It's great for going wide. For any strategy that you need to slow down an aggressive start, this thing just goes. If I chump block, I can do weird things in the combat step at instant speed. Sack a creature, always very scary. And it kind of started here, really. This is one of the first creatures that did that.
Yeah, I mean, there's honestly not much more to say than what you guys did. Also, Ruben, holy crap, that introduction, Jiminy Christmas. Yeah, definitely an iconic card at the time. Didn't really find a permanent home, but it's definitely part of Magic's history. I love this card.
There you go. Nerd Girl, what's number 2?
I wish this card found a home, but
yeah,
I think them days are past.
Those days are past.
So my number 2 it's a card that I felt needed to be pretty high on the list. I don't know how much of a home it has now in any place other than EDH, because that's where I'm seeing it the most, but it is one of the most iconic Phyrexian cards you're going to see out there, and that is the Ferexian Obliterator.
Ooh.
For black, you're going to be getting a 5/5 horror Phyrexian with trample, and whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source's controller sacrifices that many permanents, so you can't even deal with the darn thing. You certainly not by doing damage. We're not happy to do that in any way. So yeah, this is an interesting card that we still see a lot of play in EDH. Every time someone's playing a black deck, this is something that, will come up.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that I bit the bullet and I made 4 of them on Arena, and I should have bought the Anthology 3 when it showed up, and it definitely it showed me that it was worth it, because Phyrexian Obliterator is just a hell of a Magic card. It's fun. It runs over people who aren't prepared for it. It's really sweet and scary. There's the great story is that it was previewed before. Dismember, thank you. That could get rid of it really easily, so it was never really a thing in standard, but it just kept getting more and more expensive because Commander's format and even modern Pioneer lists started showing up. Well, maybe not Pioneer, right? But modern lists started showing up with big scary monsters that don't let you bolt them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, or Bust, right? Yep. Like, there's not much else that we're doing to an Obliterator.
Do you have a Wrath? Yeah. Maybe. Let's hope so, because
Right.
we're going to beat you to death in the meantime, which is awesome. All right, so for my number 2 here, this is now a classic Magic card. Now a Magic card that's taught us lessons. Now a Magic card that can be forever pointed to say, look, you have this card called Splinter Twin. And did you just make a card that untaps things like Deceiver Exarch, which is now a Phyrexian Cleric? Deceiver Exarch is a blue and 2 generic mana for a 1/4 uncommon Phyrexian Cleric with Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, choose one, untap target permanent you control, or tap target permanent an opponent controls. And they accidentally the whole format.
Yeah.
Accidentally the whole format.
Yep.
I'll be honest, I forgot that this was a Phyrexian. I probably should have put this on my list.
They made it
but
one.
Yeah, they did. This whole cycle, I mean, this was a cycle, the Exarch cycle, with Entomber and Brutalizer and the other 2 that no one remembers. And Deceiver. I mean, obviously Deceiver is the winner because you put Splinter Twin on it and you make the best deck in Modern of all time.
Oops, and they still won't give it back to you. They just will not give it back. I don't know why.
One of the most passionate fan bases of any archetype of any deck is the Twin fan base.
Every time they start talking about BNR lists, here they come. All the Splinter Twin people. I mean, the Stoneforge Mystic people got there eventually.
It's true.
Maybe they will. All right, let's turn the corner here to our number 1. Ruben, what's your number 1?
So my number 1 is, it's a flag bearer for a number of cards in more ways than one, because some of the most indelible Phyrexians in my mind has to be the cycle of Praetors from New Phyrexia. And I didn't want to put all of them on my list, but what I could do is put Atraxa Praetor's Voice at number 1.
There you go.
Atraxa Praetor's Voice, which, by the way, is the second most popular card in Elder Dragon Highlander, the format, and is 4 colors. Let's just think about that for a minute. It's like the second most played Phyrexian, I think, when I looked up the list, or it's like top 5 or something like that, and it's 4 colors. Green, white, blue, black gets you a 4/4 legendary creature, Phyrexian Angel Horror, with flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, proliferate. Wow, that's a bunch of abilities. It immediately got a fan base. It immediately spurned dozens of different types of decks, because proliferate is good with +1/+1 counters, -1/-1 counters, infect, planeswalkers, everything in between, charge counters. Atraxa is spectacular.
Also, people like counters. Let's say hypothetically it was the counters were not very impactful or whatever. I still think people just love having their brick of dice and getting to use them. This is just a fun mechanic that people are going to love having. It's a great commander character because, legendary creatures with 4 colors. And it's pretty sweet. Also, there's just a big mesh of different abilities on it, which is super fun, making it a great threat on its own. And I think it's very interactive and very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's got all the sort of right numbers. It's got an ability for every kind of mana that you spent to play it, which is cool.
Yeah.
An ability that goes across all those colors, no problem. It's very exciting in terms of the things it can do. Everybody loves angels and whatnot. Now Phyrexians are in there with their own, which is cool. And yeah, this is a $25 to $60 extended art version, and with a $72 foil extended art version, which is also very exciting.
Yeah, that Kev Walker, extended border double masters version. I mean, the original Victor Adame Menges is iconic, but every art that they've ever put to Atraxa has been spectacular.
There you go. All right, Nerd Girl, what's your number 1?
So my number 1 is it should have been on my list for sure. Probably not as high as it is, but it's a bit of an honorary slot because it's very near and dear to my heart. I've got 2 of these in day 2 of the GP, and also, coincidence that we decided to do this. This is a card I've always wanted. It's been on my top 3 cards forever, and tomorrow's my birthday, so I decided to buy it for myself, independent of this show. So I was like, okay, it's just meant to be. It has to be my number 1, and it just came in the mail, and that is Judge Foil Phyrexian Ellis Norn.
Nice.
Sweetest card ever. I've always wanted it. So Ellis Norn is a 7 mana, 5 colorless, white for a 4/7 Phyrexian Praetor with Vigilance. Other creatures you control get +2/+2. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. We're not focusing. This is a card we see in any Reanimator deck. It's going to be in any sneak attack deck. It's really sweet. It's great and limited. I got to play it a ton. And also, I just love white weenie. So the idea of like anthem creature, I love.
I mean, you also chose the right time to buy it because the Secret Lair caused the Judge version to drop about 50% in price. So, yeah, you got a sweet deal on that one. That's great.
Yeah, Ellis Norn, the Grand Cenobite, is spectacularly good. Like, of all of the Praetors, Ellis Norn is the long-term winner. Not only did it see play in Standard in a number of different archetypes, it continues to see play as a reanimation target, as a sneak attack thing, and in Commander. There are a few cards where I think to myself, well, can't possibly win, and then my opponent plays them and says, well,
dang it.
Can't possibly
win on this one.
Yep.
Well, Ellis Norn, Shoulder is right up there.
Yep.
Gingitaxias, they kind of fight between how do you want to punish your opponent the most is kind of the question that they ask. Mm-hmm. And this card has always been fantastic since the moment it showed up, and I love it. But for my number 1, and by process of elimination, Ruben's number 9.
Yeah.
Have you seen the price of this card? Have you noticed what the hell is going on? This is one of the most expensive cards, not on the reserve list, that Wizards can print legally whenever they want to that isn't in the P3K set. Like, this card is ridiculous. This card, oh my God, this is one of those cards I'm like, it cannot possibly be this expensive. This is one of those cards, this is the perfect example. If you were writing a textbook about how does Magic Finance work, just take a chart and see where Ferexian Alter goes. Where does Ferexian Alter go over time? It ain't big jumps. It didn't just bop to $1 bajillion. Nope, it was just 5, maybe $10, maybe 12, maybe 15, then like 20, and then it started getting really dumb. And the current printing in Ultimate Masters is almost $90.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
For the current version.
Francine Alter is very simple, but because it's very simple, it's very powerful. It's a 3-mana artifact. It's a rare. Thank God they didn't make it mythic. But it's a rare, okay, 3-mana artifact. Sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color. That's a sick ability on anything. It can go in literally any commander deck whatsoever. It can provide you plenty of loops when you want to do the loopy thing. A mana when you need the mana thing. Steal their creatures and sack it to something. It's the perfect thing to do that to. They remove mana burn, so there's like absolutely no problem with this card whatsoever anymore. And I cannot believe it's $90. It's a lot.
I'm very surprised to hear that it's $90 when it has been printed not that long ago at only rare. Yeah. So the prices of those cards do stay a little higher in those like specialty packs because they're so expensive. So we don't open them as often as we might other things. But that is still really high. Holy smokes.
It's a bunch. And so it's an invasion rare, right? And they didn't print it. They just wouldn't reprint it for whatever reason. Well, first of all, it's got Phyrexia in the name, so it's hard to reprint it. They didn't want to put it in Scars of Mirrodin or whatever because, combo and issues of Modern or whatever's going on. So it kind of stayed in the background. They never found a commander deck they want to put it into because it got too expensive. Like, there's a tipping point where they just don't want to give you too much value in a box, and it reached it, and now it was in Ultimate Masters. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the new Double Masters thing as a mythic because the price just warrants it. I mean, it is what it is.
The excitement warrants it. There is no price. It's just excitement.
Just
It's
excitement.
a mass amount of excitement. A huge. Go to the
90
excitement
excitements.
chart.
90 excitement points. Yes.
Very, very nice. All right. Well, that was our top 10 Phyrexian cards. You'll see them on screen right now if you review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
I think what you mean instead of that was our episode on the Phyrexian cards is now our episode on the top 10 Phyrexian cards is
completed.
Completed.
That's right.
There we go.
Move here to our final slide. So I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AlterSleeves.com, my co-host, Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.